Okay, thanks for coming. And I thought it'd be only right to explain to the school what I've been up to. And also this will be kind of a fun talk. And I do have a motivation, which I'll talk about at the end, which is getting a hold of some class to do a pilot run of this. So what I've ended up doing, really wasn't what I started out to do, but what I've ended up doing is basically making a place for people to code. And by people I mean all sorts, from professionals down to secondary and possibly even primary. In fact, I have had primary school children using this. So it wasn't quite what I set out to do. I set out to do something in AI, but I realized a couple of years ago that it was heading this way, and I thought I might as well go hell for leather and make the thing and see what people use it for. Let's start by looking at, there are a bunch of places, of course, to share code. GitHub being the biggest one. And then looking at the world I've ended up focusing on, which is the world of JavaScript in the browser. There are a bunch of sites where you can upload JavaScript and change it and see various effects and so on. So I'm not exactly duplicating any of these, but I want to look at some of the questions that they raise and see if I can find some different answer to these. So how do you run the code that you find? Can you just casually walk along, click it and run it with no commitment, no install, no download, and then move on if you don't like it? Or is it more a download, install type of thing? And likewise, in relation to the client, do you write offline and then upload, or do you write online? And are there advantages to writing the stuff in an online system as opposed to offline? How do people find your code? How is your code marked and made findable to the world? How do people copy and change your code if they can? So I'm going to look at all these things, and my big inspiration, I guess, is our old friend YouTube. And what I think we all like about YouTube is you can just browse things and move on. You don't have to install an app for each video. You just look at things and you can waste your afternoon following shootouts from John Wick or whatever takes your fancy. So there's no install, there's no commit, and that's easy enough for videos. So can you make some kind of browsable site like this with attractive content that people will waste their afternoons on browsing with no install for programs? Well, to run programs with no install, the obvious technology is JavaScript. So what are we suggesting? User-submitted programs, a site where users upload programs, and you can try them out without any risk and indeed without any install. So JavaScript would be the obvious technology. We can all run JavaScript in our browsers. The sandbox model is fairly well developed at this point. Not everything can be written in JavaScript, but an extraordinary amount can, especially in recent years. So I've got into JavaScript Graphics, and if you don't know the world of JavaScript Graphics, it really has come a long way in the last few years. So this is all based on the canvas element in HTML5, and then the API is the WebGL API for 3D or 2D effect graphics on the canvas element. And then if you've ever done WebGL, it's incredibly difficult. So there are a bunch of libraries that people produce to make WebGL easy. And they do make it remarkably easy, as I kind of alluded to by talking about primary and secondary school kids using this kind of technology earlier. So I'll talk about that later. But let's just see a demo of JavaScript Graphics in case you don't know what kind of thing that it can do. So what are we looking at? Well, this is a web page. I love the web, and I don't like PowerPoint, so my PowerPoint here actually is a web page, and it's done an iframe of another web page here, just to show you. So this is actually live, this web page inside the first web page. So what's the background? Well, the background is JavaScript Graphics, and if we just open this in a new window, we might see the graphics. So you see there, it's just a fancy background to the web page. It does have a good point to it, which is if you don't see the JavaScript graphics, then my site doesn't work on your machine. The only machine I'm definitely sure it doesn't work on at the moment are Windows phones, and I haven't really investigated, but probably I think we can live with that. So now I'm about to just do something as well. That's a background. This is actually a web page. I'll get out of full screen so you can see it's a web page, and that's my background. And if I take the mouse, I can drag the background. That's the camera that I can drag about, and I can hide the content here. And just have another look. So we've got 3D graphics that we can stick in a div on a web page. We can have it in the background. We can have a camera that we can do rotates and close-ups and things like that. And that's all very nice. And what a lot of people are doing with JavaScript graphics is they're using it to just flash up their websites. They're putting backgrounds on it or some kind of game or whatever in JavaScript graphics. So what do I want to do with it? Well, also, yeah, just before I move on, that this is all pretty stable now. So that'll work on mobiles and tablets. So it'll work, that kind of background works on you know, pretty much any phone, any smartphone. Just in the browser. Change the weather, I say. So I've got weather on my background, and there we go. We can change it to rain and so on. Anyway, and now it's raining on every single page. So whatever page you go to, it's raining on it. Okay, so people are using this kind of thing to flash up their websites, put in ads, and so forth. So where do I want to take it? Well, can we use this kind of thing to build well, this is a bold claim, I guess, a YouTube of code. And by a YouTube of code, it's not going to be exactly like YouTube, but what I mean essentially is that feature where you come along and there are things to look at and you can just browse them and click them and waste your afternoon. And that, in fact, is what I have been working on. So if we look at, if we go to most liked worlds here, for example, we have a series of worlds, some of which I wrote. Others were written by third-year undergraduates last year on the prototype of this system, and I've kind of ported them. I've kept them with me all the way as I've developed this new system because they're too nice to lose. So we have here one of my students made a tribute to Super Mario, and we can click that, and again this is all a web page. There is music available, there's all this kind of thing. There's built-in camera so we can zoom in, and we've keyboard controls so we can move this guy about. I've never actually finished this game. He made it slightly too hard.
I tried it and didn't finish it either.
Yeah, it's just perfect because
I couldn't get a game.
yeah, you have to be. It's the perfect game, which is you have to be really dedicated just to finish it. He's timed it just right. You can just about see you could finish it. So my students were very creative, and I kind of want to unleash creativity on a number of different levels and with a number of different target audiences. Now, I think games would probably be the bread and butter of this, but I hope to convince you there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do on it. And really my job is to make this kind of graphics easy. So this is a third-year undergraduate class, so they're decent programmers, and they were able to make these things. But I've actually run it with secondary transition year students as well, and with no computer science courses behind them. And they've been able to make things out of it as well. Not quite as sophisticated as my CS undergraduates. Okay, so I refer to these programs as worlds, and there's a bunch of starter worlds that I provide, And what the starter worlds have is they kind of illustrate how to do certain things in the code. So this whole project, the people writing things for it are expected to actually look at the JavaScript. So I'm not producing a Scratch system, if you know Scratch for kids, where you construct programs with drag and drop. Here you'd actually get to grips with the JavaScript. So the starter worlds have easy to understand JavaScript and to illustrate all the various features. So I put a bit of work into it. The starter worlds do things like touchscreen and so on. But the goal or the dream was that you browse what users submit. There's about 300 of them now. And there's no commitment, and then you can just move on. So bookmarking, there's a variety of ways that you can refer to the uploads. So each of them is a home page. So if I missed the click there. So this is a lovely one, a kind of Game of Thrones inspired sort of world from Neve Byrne. I took her snow as well. I asked her, could I use her snow on my background? I love snow. So we might as well look at it since I'm talking about it. So it's a game like a lot of them. They weren't all games, but and you have to move the queen about. I think she's stuck already, is she? Oh no, there she is. But if you see this model here, for example, the student actually sourced that model and uploaded it into the world themselves. So that model didn't come on the system. So there's a world homepage. I'm logged in here, so I can take various actions, including making a copy of the worlds and editing my own one. I can link directly to a run, where it'll just start up again, and I can reload runs and so on. But this next one is one that I kind of like, which is like YouTube embeds. So YouTube, one of the big things, if you remember this when way back when YouTube started, there were plenty of videos online. And one of the things that helped YouTube spread was that you could embed those little YouTube videos in your own website. So of course we can embed pretty much anything with iframe. And so on all the pages, I have embed codes. You see the embed code there. So we can embed all these things on your web page, is what I'm doing here, because the talk is over here on the computing site, and I'm embedding a JavaScript world running over on the Ancient Brain site. So this one here is an illustration of keyboard and touch. You'd have to run it on this to see the touch aspects, but the touch does work. And I can, oops, better. Volume down a bit. So we can move this guy around by the keyboard. It's a lot more fun to move him around with your finger. So that all works inside the iframe. So I'm creating a platform to make games. Sure, games will be a large part of it, but not the only part. But I'm also creating a platform to allow you embed games in web pages. So you could show off the stuff you write yourself, or you could say, well, look, here's things I found on Ancient Brain, and they're related to physics or something, and have them on your site. This one allows me touch objects with the mouse in order to select them, and that works on touch as well. We won't go into that. That was a nice one written by. Might as well look at it. So I'm just going to play this whole thing inside the iframe. So you have to guess how many UFOs there are, or whatever they are. It's impossible, that one, if you've tried it. There's Super Mario, and we can play that inside the iframe. There's a couple of things you have to do with the code, really, if anyone's interested. You just have to mind a couple of things with your event handling so that the key hits or mouse drags don't transmit to the parent page. Anyway, I don't really expect that this world to be that the site will be massively used inside embeds. I think most of the usage will be over on the site itself, but it's nice that you can do this. So the idea is that you can embed and put your CV of work. So one of the things about this site is it's a bit different to uploading videos. The programs are all dependent on my system libraries. So it's, if you put a bit of work in, like these authors did, you put a bit of work into your world, it doesn't really run anywhere else because you need all these libraries to get it to run. So that was my motivation for having embeds, because now you can have it on some other site by embedding it. But actually it's still on the Ancient Brain site. So portability, obviously, with programs is a little trickier. Also, I prefer to keep it on the site and have people embed it to keep control of what's going on. So online editing was the next thing. If we're going to run in the browser, well, can we edit in the browser? So I wanted to provide a complete solution. Sure, you could develop somewhere else and upload. But I wanted to make it so easy to do authoring that even children, non-programmers, would actually try. So there's a goal. There's non-programmers, even children, would try modifying JavaScript code. So that was my goal, and I have seen this happen. So I just want to show you editing a world. So we'll go to Starter Worlds. Well, we go to the home page. Here's our home page. And a few sample worlds. We can click for more. There's as I say, there's 300 of them. But let's go over to Starter Worlds here. And what was I going to do? Complex World. Let's do that. So you need to log in. So if we look at Complex World here, Complex World, I'm going to run it. It's a bad guy chases a good guy around this landscape. The human interaction is limited to moving the camera about. We can drop the camera down into the world so that it's now sitting on the good guy. We can use it to track the good guy as he moves about the place, or we can go back to a fixed position and just do it ourselves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to edit it. So first of all, I'll make a copy. I'm not going to edit the original. So I make a copy, which is called cloning. And then I go to my clone. So this is my clone copy that I now own. The original one was owned by a different account. And now I'm going to edit it. So we've got a JavaScript editor with syntax highlighting, the kind of things you want. But I'm just going to show you how quickly we can make changes. I'm going to speed things up 10 times. Hit save. So I'm all in the browser here. And I just run. And now it's sped up 10 times. It got caught again. Let's just reload so we can see. I can change the grid size. Let's make the grid size a bit bigger to 50. Now, and save. So I've showed this to...
What's it? Can I ask you a question? You've got some images in there. I think they're the same ones that are in here.
Yeah.
They're basically file names. Are they part of the world? Or what?
Exactly. The images you have here, you see these? They're in the uploads for the user starter. So this, I'm logged in as test here, which is slightly different to starter. But if we just find, it's the previous page. If we find starter user,
okay, so I can upload,
and we look at their uploads.
I can upload stuff,
yeah,
resources, and if you want to use them, this is the naming scheme.
That's it. Yeah, it's a URL basically. Yeah. I mean, at the moment it maps kind of one-to-one to the file system, but that could be disconnected eventually. So I'm using starter's resources. I cloned the code from the starter user, but I'm still using their resources in here. And what you can do then, it's obviously pretty easy to do, is you upload your own JPEG, and then when you run, your face is on these things, or maybe your face is on the wall, or whatever it is. So, I'm aiming at, I'm imagining to write one of these things from scratch, this whole world, you'd need to be a proper programmer, a CS undergraduate at least. It's a couple hundred lines. But to mess around with some of the code and insert different things in it, it depends, as you might be thinking, on how the program is written. And not everyone is going to write a program that's easily changeable by somebody who doesn't know too much about what they're doing. But if you want your program to be messed around with and edited by other users, then you're going to stick these kind of things up at the top, set the speed, the images, and so on, and make it easy for people to change. So I've sat down with kids, primary and secondary, relations and friends of relations, and done some tests, and it doesn't take them long, and they enjoy doing it, messing around with this JavaScript. So I'm kind of imagining a sort of 3 levels of users. Yeah?
So
sure.
So there's JavaScript and what? So that you've got this thing AB.
Yeah.
Clear in there, so it must be coming from somewhere. And there's a thing called 3 as well.
Absolutely.
So you must have some things that you provide.
Yeah, 3 is 3.js, which is the basic graphics library. If we just look at the world here, where's my world gone? So each of these worlds has an API. I have a list of APIs here. There's only 3 of them at the moment. And this one is using 3or80. 3or80 is 3JS library, release 80. Now, and that will never change, because one of my principles will be that if it works, it always works. So if there's a release 90 or whatever, I'm going to have another API, and you write your world for release 90 or release 80, whichever you like. But we're going to freeze these things and not have them develop. So what does 3JS gives you? It gives you a lot of support for 3D and 2D graphics. The API is stuff I've written on top of 3JS. And that gives you built-in control of the camera and touch control and so on. So it gives you things that a lot of people might like to use, but that aren't necessarily there in 3JS. And then it explains the global variables. So I've worked hard not to pollute the global namespace, which is a common pitfall in JavaScript. There are 4 global variables that the user needs to be aware of, and that's it. Everything else, everything is inside those 4. And they can access certain functionality, and they can read here how to deal with this API.
But that documentation.
Oh, I did. So this is I wrote these the 3 APIs. We just look at the list of APIs, and there's one with physics, which is a slightly more advanced one. It's based on 3JS, and then with physics, and then we have a plain one. I'm going to actually mention those 2 later with the demo. So we looked at editing, and one thing about the editing is as soon as you press save, the code is live. So I'm kind of imagining, you could be working with friends, and as soon as you press save, they can run. There's no upload and download delays while they wait to see the new version. I'm giving you, we could talk about this later, I'm giving you full JavaScript functionality within reason. There's a couple of basic checks, but you essentially can do almost anything with the run window. And I'm going to see how this goes in terms of security and deception and so on. We'll see if that's an error, but I'll explain some of my thinking later. So we did various things. You can add your own music, and the music is just a file name, and add your own images, whatever. Depending on how the program is written, these things may be incredibly easy or more or less impossible. So we saw cloning. I cloned Complex World. The whole thing about JavaScript is it's client-side, so you can view the source anyway of all. These are all web pages. You can all these runs. So that run is a web page, as you can see up there. So you can just view the source, dig into it, and find the JavaScript. That's the nature of JavaScript. So the clone button copies somebody else's code. It doesn't really do anything new, it just makes it easy. As part of my terms and conditions, you agree to all this happening on this site. You don't agree to your code being used on any other site, is the terms I have. Many worlds will be open source, clone away, work away with it, that's what they're for, like the starter worlds. Now, not everyone will like that, so I do have an obfuscate button. So if we just look at the edit, where's the edit there? Do you see here plain text and obfuscate? So you can obfuscate your code. Why don't we do that? I'll obfuscate and save. And if we just go to the page, this is the edited thing that I had. Something beeped there. Obfuscated. The JavaScript is obfuscated. That's what it means. It's incomprehensible. It's very hard to edit. You have to deobfuscate. And that's not so easy. Yeah. Well, there's a whole universe of obfuscate and deobfuscate obsessives. But if I switch back to plain text and save, nope. What have I done? Crash the demo. Did I? Oh, I think my Wi-Fi went off. Hold on. Let's try it again. Let's try plain text. Humpty Net, yeah. Too many people on it. Okay, so say plain text, and now we're back in plain text. There we go, the JavaScript. Now, the thing about obfuscation is, deobfuscation is hard. There are deobfuscators, but some things are gone forever, right? The comments are gone forever, the variable names, etc. It's also against terms, so that'll stop people. That'll deal with it. Okay. So, but this will be useful in projects, in student projects. And frankly, if the students are able to deobfuscate each other's work, reconstruct it, I mean, they deserve the marks, don't they? More or less. So if you're running teaching practicals, and I did with the prototype, I had obfuscation working. Now, it's not just about human players or games. So it was kind of inspired by things in AI where the world would be a problem. So probably the bread and butter would be worlds designed for human to interact with, and the majority of those would be games. But I'm also very interested in worlds that are designed for a program to interact with them. So in that one there, where's this one again? There's no human interaction. So the job of the programmer is to get away from the bad guy for as many steps as possible. You have a look at the scoring system as to what your score is, but the further you are away, the higher your score. So it's a programming problem, and what that is called is a world that has a mind. So the mind is the program injected into the world to try and solve the problem, and then it runs in the world. The other worlds just run with a human, like the Game of Thrones world. So the world returns a score for how well the mind did. There's an API set up for this, and there's a scoreboard. So if we just go to back to the world page, we might see there's a scoreboard. Which we've got a score of 0 so far because I never let a run end. But the scoreboard will show all the minds that have acted until the end of the run or until the world delivered the score. It's up to the world to return the score back to the server. There's a sample world that has a few more scores. We might leave that. Okay, so the aim is to make it useful for teaching as well as in research. I mean, the problem could be something practically unsolvable. So being a teacher of programming, I put in a bit of work into a special type of world designed for teaching practicals. So the big restriction, sure, is that it has to be in JavaScript, but you know, anybody who knows programming can pick up a bit of JavaScript very quickly. Anyone who does any kind of web programming or web design or whatever probably has been exposed to some JavaScript. So if you can live with that, you set your world type to teaching worlds and you get various things. Well, pool of practicals. It's not that big at the moment, but you know, if this is used by other teachers, then you've got this growing pool of practicals and you can pick one out, a practical to solve a certain problem. You can have these compelling graphics, which your students might like, or you might even like. It might make it more fun. So instead of so you can have a maze problem, but just have 3D. I mean, really, there isn't a lot of 3D. In this one, it's a 3D effect, if you like. The real problem is a two-dimensional problem. You can actually jump over these things. I think somewhere else, if I just check 3D, maybe. Yeah, there we go. There's a 3D one there that my son made. And there it is. And they chase each other around in a 3D environment. And that really wasn't too hard. Needed a few clues, but he was able to make that at age 16. Okay, so no admin, student login. The students can deal with their own login. There's login, registration, all the usual things. Online submission, you don't have to deal with that. They're up there. Something we always worry about with student programs is how do I run this, and you know, is there any risk to my machine or the machine I'm using? So there's no risk to doing that. Then there's some other features. The student code is obfuscated and can't be changed. So the student code is hidden from all of the users, but the world owner can see it. Online scoreboard with automatic marking. And here's the most fun bit, and I actually did this, which is editing the student code. So you get in the student code, and they have a solution, and you run it, and you're about to give them some marks, and then you look through the code, if you're a good teacher, and you realize, oh, they messed up there. What if I just comment that line out? It would actually make it a lot better. And so you do, and you run it. And we tend not to do that with student programs because it's a pain, or we're not sure what's going to happen next. So I've tried to make it easy, and sure, I'm motivated, but I actually did it, marking all those projects on the prototype. So I never edited, I don't know about you, I never edited student code before, but this thing just makes it really easy, and no one else can do it. Okay, so I have a series of things set up for teachers. Now, one issue might be, well, certainly you might also wonder, where's my editor's choice? Worlds, there we go. Most of them, of course, made use of the graphics. That's what attracted most of the students. But what some of them did was they went more into the AI. So setting up a problem is this, oh, something wrong with, that works fine on the machine over there. It's something to do with my resolution here on the laptop. So anyway, it does actually work. Of course, I can blame all bugs on the student. No, I really can. Cathal mightn't actually have used the system properly. It's quite possible. But running that on a big desktop, it's lovely, and it's a solution to Sudoku that you can see in running, and it's randomized and so on. Okay, we'd have to look at the code, and I probably never will, to see why that's not scaling to other resolutions, or not this resolution anyway. Okay. Yeah, it's Cahill's fault, honestly. Okay. So what can you do with it? You can actually, you don't have to use this fancy graphics. You can put up a text problem and have a solution to a text world. I just want to show a couple of things that professionals can do. So if we just look at this one here, this is the same technology. This is 3.js. And you can see the light here as we can move the camera about. It's and change to Lamborghinis or whatever. Is that loading me? Yeah. So so there are some pretty amazing effects. We can have. JavaScript library. That is JavaScript. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And this isn't even a good laptop, as I think he pointed out. more animation like this of we've got a camera? We do, yeah. So this is just a web page. This is JavaScript on Canvas. This is beyond my skill set, and people are making various games, shoot 'em up games and things like that. So I want to build a site that professionals could at least upload that stuff to. It should work. And that hopefully they'll feel is worth putting it on because there'll be other people there messing around with simpler worlds. I'm not going to depend on 3.js. As I say, with the whole API system, we'll be supporting we already support any JavaScript graphics library. It's just not as handy as using 3.js because I provide some functionality, but actually any JavaScript is already supported.
You can just include it?
Yeah, you can. I'm allowing you drag in remote JavaScript at runtime.
At runtime?
Yes, God help me.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this in a minute. You can explain what can go wrong. Okay, so you can also upload your JavaScript library into your own personal space and then just make a local include from it. Mobile and tablet, I was going to ignore this, but my kids nagged me. And so I looked into it, and I just can't believe how easy it's got. If you haven't discovered Display Flex, it's just incredible. And then you just have one website and it works and everything. It's really so easy. It really is. So I haven't written an app. I use Display Flex, and it's a website, and it runs on all these devices. What's that? That's my tablet. Even a Kindle. Kindle Fire. Okay, touchscreen. So once I got into that, I did a bit of touchscreen, and then we wanted touchscreen not just for the web pages, but touchscreen for the worlds. And it's actually not that hard. You can't really see it here. We'd need some trickery with the camera and plugging this up or whatever. But you can actually, inside these worlds, I can drag, and I can also use my finger, and I can scroll, and I can also pinch. So what it means is, and I can also hit things. I can hit objects. So you see that guy there? When I hit him with the mouse, there we go, he turns into a dead bad guy. So that kills him. I can do that with my finger. And so this enables, what it enables is make your own mobile games. Let's just turn that off. I needed a stop button there for, if you're going to embed something that's actually a web page, it can start music and things, and then you need a way of turning it off. So when I press stop, it searches for all audio and turns them off, and searches for all timers. JavaScript has all these timers setting off events. It searches for those and turns them off as well. So it's a bit more complex than just pausing a video like in a YouTube embed. Touch. So you can make your own mobile games. So I've created a platform for making games that your friends can play on their mobile. So I'm targeting the lucrative teenage nerds and gamers market, as so many people have before. And so what I'm imagining is among any general circle of teenage gamers, there'll be one or two of them that are a bit more techie than the others and are able to mess around with games or customized versions of existing games on demand to their friends who are just players. So they'll be on their phone and they'll be inserting pictures or whatever into the world or changing its logic, and their friends sitting beside them will be playing the thing. And their touch, which is what the young folk like these days, and not just the young folk. Okay, so you can code on mobile, and again, I wasn't quite going to do this, but once I realized with a few tweaks, it's pretty easy. So this is coding on the mobile, and I have actually coded on the mobile many times, even standing up now. Just talking to people and changing things like this, standing up. And you have everything there. It's incredible how powerful the modern mobile browsers are. Syntax highlighting and everything, the usual stuff. So you can code in bed, and I haven't coded on the bus yet, but no doubt that's ahead. Okay, so I'm imagining a kind of social thing whereby someone's messing around with their uploads and their friends are beside them in the pub playing their creations and giving them orders for the next thing. So I do have more classic social features, not a lot at the moment, but I took a few months had to do some work. So I didn't have to, but I did. So we got pictures, biographies, a user homepage. There's comments and likes. So it's fairly basic to begin with, but at least you can comment below Worlds and Minds and like them and things like that. Okay, so APIs. So many sites, we're talking about JS Fiddle and so on. So you can upload JavaScript snippets, and they're designed for people to often to illustrate a point on a web page. How do you do a drop-down menu or something? This is kind of designed to systematically enable the upload of complex JavaScript worlds. So I have these APIs that we mentioned before, and most of them use 3 or 80. So we've gone through that. The core rule of APIs, they never change. Instead, new functionality means new APIs. So when you upload your thing, it should always work. Forever, I know, is a hard promise in technology. So 20 years' time, do people still use JavaScript? Like we're all on something else. But we'll see. Anyway, we'll give it a go. Now, the low-level API is called. Yeah.
Do you write the API?
Well, the API is not written by users at the moment. Now, it's an interesting thing whether I could have a system for user-uploaded APIs.
Because like
it might be a can of worms.
490 comes out and
Yeah.
the kids want to use the new features
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
490, but you don't have an API for it.
Yeah. At the moment, the APIs are written by me or whoever else is working on this, and the whole thing is designed with especially where the files go and everything, with the assumption. So there's no user uploaded, but yeah, maybe I need to. Maybe I need to think about it.
Yes, or they can do it themselves.
Well, I'll tell you what they can do is they
That
won't.
would be an interesting thing for students to write an API.
Yeah, exactly. They have to do a DIY version, and they can, because they can upload their worlds and minds, and they can also upload arbitrary number of other JS files into their upload space. So they basically have to assemble their own API, and for some of them it wouldn't be too hard. So whether I need to put it into the system list, I'm not sure. But it might be nice. Maybe they could tag it API, and then you could find user uploaded. I'll think about it. Yeah. So the Canvas API is the very bare bones one to do your own JavaScript programming on Canvas. So it's got no graphics library at all. It creates a canvas, and you have to do everything yourself. Now, why would you want to do that? Because you're doing some particular usage where 3.js would get in the way. You're doing something else with JS. Or you're using a totally different graphics library. So you're not using 3.js. You need the canvas, fine, and then you include the different JS graphics library, and you get to work. So I did create, so this is the documentation for the bare bones one. Maybe we'll look at the source code. Actually, that'll be a good source code to look at. So this is basic WebGL graphics with no JS library. And I was just going to show this because it's really rubbish. You see that? That's all it does. Right? Dances around and makes these random shapes. And now we look at the code. And this is as simple as I managed to get the code. So this is the code to do all that. And that's as simple as I could make. Well, that's fairly simple, I guess, but not for what you're going to get. So if you use 3.js, you get all that in a couple of lines. But with WebGL, it's pretty horrible. So I guess the analogy is, I mean, forgive me if you've done WebGL or whatever, but the analogy is a bit like assembly or whatever. This is like assembly, and it's there for people who need it, which is nobody so far, but I imagine it will be eventually. Now here's this one.
If you want to get people to collaborate, and if you're going to be doing the APIs yourself, you're going to, first of all, it's a lot of work for you, and secondly, you're going to really narrow down people's creativity, because they can only do things that you've kind of thought of.
Well, no, you might say at the moment they can, well, at the moment using the 3 API they can do things that the 3 community has thought of, but that's a hell of a lot of things. I mean, all those Lamborghinis and everything, that's all 3. So they're not too restricted to that. I mean, what they are restricted is if there is a release 90 or whatever, well, there probably is already, that I won't do the new stuff because I don't want to risk breaking the old worlds. So they're going to have to wait until this site puts up the 3R90. But if 3R90 is compatible, as it should be, with 3R80, then me or whoever is working on this site could get the new API up in about an hour, maybe half an hour. Just make sure the documentation is there, and you know, you have the correct thing.
I was thinking you want something where people can do it all themselves.
No, but they can. That's the point. Well, first of all, within 3, they can do everything that you can do in 3. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the aim, I think.
What if this dude over there wants to use my version of 4, which is tweaked, like to do it this way, and
well,
the creativity of people happens when they can work like that, not when they're forced to use a limited set of libraries.
Yeah, you might be regarding 3R80 as a.
You can expand. You can raise your thinking up to a meta level where you think you're providing something more like NPM or something like that, which allows people to dump stuff in there and other people to use it. Rather than you yourself curating the APIs.
Well, put it this way. I've done 3 APIs, and certainly next to my list of things to do is kind of do the top 10 most used JavaScript graphics libraries. And to be honest, it wouldn't take long. I'd probably do all that in a week, I'm sure. I don't think it's really a problem. I think there'll be 20 APIs on this soon, and then 30, and you know.
Is there any other reason why you're stopping people doing their APIs? Is it insecure? Is it dangerous?
Well, the API is part of the system at the moment. So what people are meant to upload is programs that run using those libraries, and then they can call their own libraries as well if the built-in libraries aren't enough for them. I don't think it's a big thing. As I say, if I get help or indeed time, which is coming up anyway, probably be 20 APIs, 30 on this pretty soon, and they're not a huge overhead. It's just they're currently built in as part of the system, and so the user space is somewhere else. I'd have to do a certain amount of rejigging if we were to let users, but no, it's a good idea, and I think it's worth thinking more about. Let's show you the physics one anyway. This is a physics library done by called Fizzy.js. I think the user are a small number of users behind this. Not sure they're working on this anymore, because 3JS is a very much dynamic community. But it's nice, and so I'm using it. And if we look at this here, we might do this in a. Oh no, maybe I won't. I'll do it here. It's got physics. So we got these blocks here, and they've momentum, they've friction, and you can change the friction and the momentum and the gravity, and you can make them float, you can make them more bouncy, more elastic, and you can do all the usual things that you'd imagine you can do. It's built on 3JS. You can make blocks, you can add textures to the blocks, sound effects. The sound effects are when they hit at a certain velocity. I showed a 9-year-old, that's my nephew, how to change gravity in the code. I might show you his code later, but he was able to change gravity, and this is someone who had some Scratch. He'd done some Scratch programming, but he'd never done any JavaScript. So if we just look at a couple other things, there's 3D models, as you saw. You can import these pre-built 3D models, and there's lots of archives of those. There's sample code to show how to do it. This one here is multiple skeletons world. I might open it in a new window. It's kind of looks a bit better. So the skeletons all chase you about. So there you are. There, you're the hero. Here's the hero's face. Oh, there. You still hadn't. You see, it's kind of asynchronous. It makes these AJAX calls to get all the resources. So it can take a little while before it's loaded up all the resources. It depends on your network and your machines. So there he is there, and all these models will chase him. And you can insert your own models. So you saw the Game of Thrones where somebody inserted a model of the Queen into it. So this is the big one I'm not too sure of. Upload arbitrary JavaScript. So the run window is on a separate server called runancientbrain.com. And currently I'm allowing you upload any JavaScript at all to it. And I'm even allowing you include third-party JavaScript on the fly. So here's my help page, how to include another JS file.
How many bitcoins have you found?
So we'll see how this goes. So is this mad? So some discussion welcome, but maybe I'll try and finish my talk first if you have any ideas on attacks. I love this phrase, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, so the JavaScript can't mess up with your login. So the login is pretty important. I'm logged in here and I have all my creations. You don't want the JavaScript to be able to mess with any of that, but it's on a different server. So the AJAX calls are going to another server. It can't address this server at all. So basically what it means is each run is an unknown website. It's like you clicked on social media onto a website. You're not really sure what you're going to find there. So I warn all the users about this. I say treat runs with caution. It's like clicking onto a random website, and report anything misleading or attempted to be malicious. So I don't think simply clicking onto a runancientbrain.com with random HTML and random JS can cause a problem, but this is famous last words. I'm planning to get students to try and hack this. So we'll see. I think we might skip over fake scores because we don't want to be too long. But that's one I'd like feedback on as to whether I can allow my users inject arbitrary JS provided it's on a separate server, or is there a problem with that? It did come from AI, and I might leave that aside. It's just my whole thing in AI was about AI systems calling other AI systems. So building hybrid systems whereby the expert system would call the neural network to do things and whatever. And they'd be written by different authors. That's the whole point. So I'd like for this to make some contribution to that, so what I have is a system whereby minds can easily call other minds. Sure, I might as well just say the rough idea. The rough idea would be the world is a game of chess, right? And on the scoreboard, there's the top player and the number 2 player. These are programs, okay? The programs playing the chess. You analyze the programs and you realize the top scoring program is good at closing, but the second program is actually better at opening. It's just as the game progresses, the first program becomes better and it's got a better end game. So what you do is you build a supermind, if you like, that if we're in the opening stages, we call the second program. If we're in the closing stages, we call the first one. And the supermind doesn't have any AI in it. Essentially, all it's done is it's observed which of these subminds is good at which parts of the problem space. So that was my AI motivation for all of this kind of thing. And I wanted to make it easy to build multi-mind systems. So you can do that now. There isn't a lot of that going on, but hopefully eventually there will be systems like that emerging. Conclusion, debug needed. So I've written it. Every line of code is from me. 36,000 lines of code at the moment, but I've only just launched it, so debug needed. So I really want pilot programs, and I'm going to do a bug bounty. So I'm going to talk to students and offer money for hacking it. I'm quite interested in these kind of flaws, where the JavaScript tries AJAX calls it's not meant to make, and this one is very interesting. If you know, cross-site request forgeries are when you set up a link for somebody and they click on the link, but they're already logged in. You know, the link is to their login site, and they didn't realize. And the link is essentially making an AJAX call to the login site, but they're logged in, so the AJAX call goes through and it deletes their stuff. But they clicked it somewhere else, in email or whatever. So I don't think you can do any cross-site request forgeries on this site, but anyone who finds them, I'll pay money. teachers, which is us, I guess. I'd love someone to run a pilot practical with a teaching world, maybe for marks or maybe just for fun. What would it fit into? Any kind of introduction to programming. Ideally, they'd have some JavaScript, but you know, it depends. Any decent third year would pick up this stuff very, very quick. So I did it. I did it with a class of third years, and I think I gave them 1 hour of intro to JavaScript first, and then left them alone. And they were able to build that kind of stuff with, you know, the Super Marios and all that. So you can let me know if anyone wants to do that. I'll give you a break for an hour and 2 hours even. Take one of your labs. If you're sick, call me quick. I'll take the lab. So I'd love to try this with some third level CS students. I'd also like to try it with some second level transition year or something. So I'm trying to do some work on getting into schools. Okay, what next? Those two we talked about. I need to find my early adopters. I'm looking at scaling the file system. So we talked about those uploads and everything. I mean, what happens, you know, when those uploads go into the millions and stuff? I don't know much about that. So if there's any expert in scaling file systems, and basically, you know, you got to disconnect the URL from the file system in some way. You know, at the moment the URL is mapping one-to-one to the file system. So upload starter is an actual directory called starter in a directory called uploads. I think it breaks down my current system if there are 64,000 world authors. So sometime before I get 64,000 world authors, I need help but I think it's going to be easy enough. You know, we set up a new file system and have the URLs mapped to it.
Where are you getting that number from?
Oh, the ext4 file system only allows 64,000 directories per directory. Subdirectories.
You sure?
They allow an arbitrary number of files per directory, but 64,000 subdirectories apparently.
Is the inode number?
Okay.
This is it's ext4, which is the one I'm using on Liquid Web, which is my hoster. So on ext3, which I think you have here, is 32,000 subdirectories. I think.
We're on ext4.
Are you ext? Okay. Yeah. I don't know why, but that's what I've read. That's the limit. So.
I think it's to do with inode numbers.
Yeah, you need inode numbers for files as well.
It's only, can you have a,
You just break them
is
down.
it 64 for each directory?
Well, yeah, I could have one directory for each letter of the alphabet, and then I got 26 times 64,000. Exactly. It's not too hard. And an Apache rule, I could get an Apache rule to redirect the old URL to the file. You know, it's. I'm not worried that it's suddenly going to stop working. But as it scales up, I need to think about the file system. I don't know much about huge file systems. I just thought I'd show you this. This is my nephew, 9 years old. And I showed him where the line was to change gravity, which I need to get rid of a few things here. Well, where did he get it from anyway? He got it from the starter worlds here. And in the starter worlds for physics, it's collision world. So we go look at it. And we go look at the JavaScript. Now, it's not too easy. The starter bit is easy enough. The 9-year-old was able to change images and things like that. The gravity is a bit more buried because it's, well, maybe it could be brought to the top. But anyway, the gravity is buried. So I had to show him where it was. In fact, I've forgotten. So I'm just going to search for gravity. There we are. So there's the gravity down there. And the gravity, so what this is, by the way, is the physics library. The physics library, PhysiJS, allows you to set gravity in X, Y, Z dimensions. So the obvious thing to do is to set gravity in X or Z if it's going down in Y, or whatever the dimensions are. So he had great fun doing that, and that's what he made. And he sent all his blocks sideways in a hurricane, and then what he did was he generated more blocks in a shorter interval. I showed him where that line was, and he changed the block generation to every 2 milliseconds or something, until there were just so many blocks that he managed to crash the tab. So he was delighted then. to do that. So so there's a few technical issues there, and I'm not sure I've made all the right decisions, but I guess I'll find
I
out.
assume, Mark, that
Yeah.
these tabs are quite heavy on memory usage.
This
Is that why you keep closing tabs?
no, well, more so on mobile devices. So it all depends on the machine. Any kind of modern machine is not going to have any problems with these things. I mean, this is Windows 7 I have here.
This one was struggling, but this is pretty crap coding.
How old is it?
3 years, 4 years? It's got about 2 gigs of memory. It gets very
Oh, 2 gig, yeah. Anyway, it's really not much to do with. It's really not much to do with my site. It's to do with two things. One is the JavaScript graphics libraries themselves, and they work hard to be runnable on the simplest machines that it's feasible on. I mean, these things actually run on phones and so on. You know, at least one at a time or whatever is probably advised. And then the other one is the world that you make, as like with my nephew. He was deliberately trying to crash the thing. So the basic thing ran fine, but he ramped it up until the Chrome started grinding to a halt for fun. So you're not going to be too. I mean, you can have infinite loops and things. You know, you're writing a program. It could be infinite loops, all sorts of stuff. Well, they're not on my server, right? You're always worried about what's on the server. It's Liquid's web's problem now. Don't worry. Yeah, they're on your machine. They're on the browser. So they're not my server's problem. But they're inevitable with programming.
Sorry, what was the issue with run? The run thing you just said. Rob and JavaScript to it.
Which one? Sorry.
What was it called? Run on ancientbrain.com. That was a server.
Oh yeah. So
what's running on a server?
Yeah. So this let's just go to this world here. So if you just look at the address there, that's ancientbrain.com. But all the runs are taking place on run.ancientbrain.com. Do you see that?
What's running in the server?
Well, nothing really. What's happening is run.ancientbrain.com is where all the resources come from for the run. So when the JavaScript wants to make an AJAX call to the server it came from, which is the single origin policy, it can only talk to the server it came from, so it can't talk to ancientbrain.com, which would be very dangerous because that's where the login is.
Yeah.
So it can only talk to run.ancientbrain.com where it can do nothing really.
Yeah, but so no JavaScript code that anybody produces runs in your server?
No.
Okay.
None.
I got the impression that was what you were worried about crashing and stuff, no? In my bug bounty section, I was worried about attacks using AJAX calls essentially from the client going back to the server. Yeah. I just got the impression that something was running on your server.
Well, I mean, I did. I was talking to Steve about this. Like the problem. There was one page I skipped over about fake scores, because the problem is the run takes place on the client, then it reports back to the server what the score was. The problem is that run is a mix of your code as the teacher and the student's code. So what if the student's code is hacking the score somehow? And there's so many ways to hack it. If your world uses global variables, the mind, which is the student bit, could change the global variables. If the mind can make an AJAX call, then it can just make an AJAX call to set the score and just ignore the world. You know, just my score is 100%. You know, now. So what I have is, if I just zoom back to there, fake scores. This is the downside of running the stuff on the client. So I did do a lot of experimentation with running the stuff on the server. Obviously, you don't display any graphics, but there were a number of problems. One is it doesn't quite solve it. So you basically need to sandbox the world away from the mind.
and make sure that the mind can only talk to the world through a very controlled API, and it can't access any data well, that's a world API, but it can't access data in the background API either. Eventually, I gave up and decided to run it on the client. Because here was my thinking, which was I could get partial solutions, but the partial solution, you get a full sense of security that there's no such thing as a fake score. So, sorry, maybe the big picture is, the big picture was, the big picture currently is that as a teacher, you must run the student's worlds and watch what it's doing and spot if it's doing some trickery, right? So that is the downside. The nice thing would be, and this would be Steve's system, the nice thing would be if the students could just submit their minds and they ran and you didn't have to look at them because you were confident there was no trickery was possible. And the problem is that if you were just running the mind as a standalone program, that here's the input, run the mind, does it produce the correct output, then you'd be okay. But the problems I'm aiming at are the world and the mind are in a constant communication. The world is moving things about, someone's chasing you, it asks the mind what to do next. And then the mind says what to do next, and then the world moves more things, and then it asks the mind. So it's this kind of constant back and forth between the two of them that's much harder to fit into an automated model. So I couldn't find, it's worth thinking about this whole page of fake scores. I couldn't find an elegant solution where you could guarantee that no fake score was ever possible. So I decided to cut the knot, and the advantage of cutting the knot was if I just put the stuff in the client, then my server is safe. The other thing I was worried about was if my sandbox isn't perfect, then my server can be brought down by bad JavaScript. But that can't happen now. So none of that JavaScript runs on my server. So the current system is only the world owner can generate a permanent score, at least, one that lasts. So the world owner needs to watch for fake scores. They can compare with the graphics to see what's going on. They can examine the code. I mean, that's the whole point. You're teaching. Presumably, you're going to look at the code, right? And then you can punish fake scores, or what I'd rather suggest is reward them, right? I mean, if your students are hacking fake scores, at least if they're doing something clever, then they should get 100%, well... Depends on your module. But you might decide to reward them for fake scores or not. Or you might say anybody who attempts to fake a score fails the module. Yeah, it's whatever. But you do have to watch. And on the sample scoreboard, if I just show you here in the teacher's environment, this is a scoreboard, I think, with lots of mine, or with 4 anyway. I'm logged in as the owner. So when I do a run, the runs count. Most of the runs don't count for the scoreboard. Only the owner of the world, if they do a run, then the run counts for the scoreboard. So I do a run, it counts, I'm suspicious, I go look at it, the student is hacked, I'm going to give them 20% for hacking and fail them for the rest, and then I'm going to reset the score to 0 because it's not a real score, and then I'm going to refuse to run it. So it doesn't get any score at all. So it's a teacher involved with the program's model. And I know we'd all like to not be involved with our practicals, but, anyway. I think that's inevitable if I go client-side. To go server-side is a can of worms with these things, and I haven't got the elegant solution to do it. But it's something I haven't quite given up on. So sandbox server-side solution where the teacher doesn't have to look at the thing running because they know there are no fakes are possible. So I might have to return to that one.
So, I believe a lot of programming languages are being implemented to output JavaScript.
Oh yeah, compiled to JavaScript. Yeah, absolutely. It's become a big thing. Yeah, yeah.
Why don't you introduce some proper languages for people to use?
Listen, I mean, I love this stuff, right? I love the web and I love doing things in the web browser, and so I love JavaScript as a result. But as a language, no, it's terrible. The object-oriented support in it is just all such a hack. It's horrible. Yeah, it's right there on my list of coming up next, which is compiled to JavaScript stuff.
I know you're saying it's even up, but for like somebody in there, like 7, 8, 9, 10. doing any significant change to JavaScript like that is going to be quite hard. Whereas if you have someone...
Oh, sorry, kids, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, kids, I mean, you know, it'd be nice to be, yeah?
A language which is much more suitable to our age group.
Yeah. Kids, what would be really great would be to scratch to JavaScript. But I'm not aware of any...
There's one, Blockly, which is a Google one like Scratch, and it produces JavaScript.
Oh, yeah? What's that called?
Blockly.
Blockly.
Can you spell that?
PLCKL.
As you know, block.
Blockly.
So it's drag and drop, but it produces JavaScript.
I can't remember. There's a mode
I'll have a look.
you can go in and edit the JavaScript, but so I suspect it's just JavaScript, which is then run because you can actually change the JavaScript.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
That sounds...
And the final one I have is, what happens when someone types in a program? Well, is there such a thing as a program? Well, what happens if a program fails because of a syntax error? I'm not sure whether there are syntax errors in JavaScript.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, JavaScript is very strange that way because it's like everything else on the web. It's designed not to tell you when there's a problem, right? Because if you're browsing the web, you don't want to see all these JavaScript syntax errors coming up. So so JavaScript, more than I don't know more than any, but more than most programming environments, is designed to work around errors and just try and keep going. And not tell you that there was a problem. But yeah, you can have catastrophic errors, no problem at all, in a JavaScript program. So nothing will display, or maybe less will display, or it'll be broken.
So for a novice, debugging would give them a trouble.
Well, the little editor the hugely complex editor called Ace that I'm using, it's used by quite a lot of projects. So if we go to, that's my version of I copied my nephew's world. It was so nice and decided to mess around with it. So when I edit here, and I put in syntax errors like that, it's telling me your problems. So, and that's JavaScript. Ace itself is a JavaScript library. Well, what will that do? I'd say that'll just crash. Not sure. It all depends. We just run that, and no, it's crashed, and I can check my console. Yeah, it just can't. There are some syntax errors JavaScript can't get over, and others it can. I mean, I think if I say.
If you had matching, it probably would get over.
I don't know. It's
more complicated than that because with JavaScript you get threads of execution, and so it goes to sleep and does nothing, and then there's a callback call later on. And what dies is the current thread of execution. In that case, it's the thread of execution which is loading the program. Mm-hmm. But it could be that it's a function call called as a callback later on that fails, and so it gets very, very complicated.
It's the whole asynchronous thing is quite confusing in JavaScript, especially when it's loading lots of resources. You've no idea at what point they're all going to return. And I'm just calling their function that doesn't exist and save. Can I get over that? No. That's pretty sad. Come on. Should not just ignore it.
It's a better outcome than just proceeding as in.
Well.
No, actually, as long as you can get that. The price thing at the side, that's okay, because at least you can see.
Yeah, not for all of them.
What's going on.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the thing is, you could be running something. You could be running. I mean, one thing to think about maybe a bit more is integration with IDEs, and you could be running something locally and and pushing it up to the server here, but I don't really have that yet. I've some basic syntax checking, which Ace does, the Ace editor. And I was just looking for a syntax error that it could survive through, because I've certainly seen.
It can survive a syntax error. It can survive looking up, maybe adding a property of an object to something else where the property doesn't exist. It'll possibly survive.
What happens if you
like
make one of those integers a string or something?
That's one that might survive or it might not.
Double quotes around 100 to survive. thought.
Well, we can do it, but it would really depend upon this. Now would depend upon my own JavaScript and what it does
When it gets a string.
when it gets a string. Exactly. So I have no idea, but I suspect this won't run at all.
Or it might just give a silly integer value.
How about
It's
that?
actually probably converting.
I think it's interpreted as 0, is it? Or
It's actually saying a conversion to the string.
oh no, wait. Possibly.
What's on the string?
Look, it's really not that interesting. It's basically. Oh no, the clock tick. I think it does add 1 to the string, and then it checks if.
No, it's actually just trying to parse the string. Put an X in front of the 100 and then try it.
Change it to 4, F-O-U-R.
Sorry.
No, not like that. It has to be in a string still.
What do you want?
It'll be a syntax error if you put an X in front of it there. You have to put it in a string.
Okay.
Okay.
It's purely nonsense.
Oh, we seem to be surviving somehow. We'd have to look in the code. Do we have any warnings? No, that's something else. The image is not
Converting
part
that into
two.
some value.
Yeah, I'd have to dig in to see what it's doing. But
Maybe there's default.
I think it probably illustrates the point that JavaScript is.
Irrespective of programming language we do that.
Yeah, with JavaScript, it's had a strange journey. JavaScript, I don't think people saw this kind of thing coming 20 years ago when it started out. It was used for these tiny little menu effects and dancing men, you know. So, but it's become something else, you know. Graphics, Ajax.
Become everything.
It's becoming everything. It really is. So it's hard to ignore. Anyway, thanks for coming, and the.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you. And.